In this Haftarah, it is apparent that Isaiah is looking far into the future of the people of Israel. Nowhere in the history of the nation do we find a fulfillment of the prophecies of Isaiah contained in this Haftarah. Almost all of Isaiah, as well as the other prophets, contain a mixture of rebuke and comfort. This chapter of Isaiah is quite different and opens with a great promise. Isaiah 60, verse 1. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. All through this chapter, Isaiah points to the excitement and anticipation of the glorious things to come for the people of Israel. As Isaiah looks into a far distant future, the prophet speaks in perfect tense, as if the events are already happening or are happening as he is speaking. In light of our recent studies in the book of Isaiah and the Song of the Servant in particular, contained in chapters 42 through 53, how should we view Isaiah's words in this chapter? What or who is the light that has come upon the land, the city, and the people of Israel? I'm Dan Cathcart, and this is Ancient Perspectives. None of the blessings and other predictions described by Isaiah in this Haftarah can be applied to any time in Israel's history. It is clear that Isaiah is speaking of the return of Messiah and his reign on the throne of David in Jerusalem. In other words, the millennial reign of Messiah Yeshua. The opening verses set the stage. Now continuing with verses 2 and 3. For behold, the darkness shall come over the earth, and deep darkness the people. But the Lord will arise over you, and his glory will be seen upon you. The Gentiles shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. We can break down this Haftarah into 4 basic areas or topics covered by Isaiah. The prophet speaks of a kind of radiance, different than one might expect. He also speaks of restoration, redemption, and righteousness. Isaiah opens with the theme of radiance. Verse 1 is reminiscent of the first 2 verses of chapter 9. Nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her who is distressed, as when at first he lightly esteemed the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterward more heavily oppressed her by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, in Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined. And a few verses later, Isaiah tells us where that light will come from. Isaiah 9, 6 through 7. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end, upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. In this Haftarah, Isaiah is still speaking of that same light. He is speaking of the work which the servant will accomplish in the nation of Israel and among the Gentiles. The great need for this light is spoken by Isaiah in verses 2, where we are told that a great darkness will come over the earth. Isaiah certainly experienced a great spiritual darkness in his day, and so did Yeshua and the disciples in their day. Let's look at John 3, 19 through 20. And this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practicing evil hates the light and does not come into the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. But this coming darkness that Isaiah speaks of is on an unprecedented scale. The word translated as cover in Isaiah 60 verse 2 is kasah, number 3680 in the Strong's Concordance, meaning to fill up the hollows and conceal to the point of overwhelming everything. It's as if the whole earth is enveloped in this covering of darkness. But Isaiah also says that there will be a great light that will rest upon Jerusalem and the people. In the wilderness, the children of Israel experienced the light going before them and being their rear guard. Here in these opening verses, Isaiah seems to speak of a light that will draw the nations of the world to Jerusalem and to the people of God. Beginning with verse 4, we see that this is a different kind of radiance. Let's look at Isaiah 60, 4 through 7. Lift up your eyes all around and see. They all gather together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from afar, and your daughters shall be nursed at your side. Then you shall see and become radiant, and your heart shall swell with joy. Because the abundance of the sea shall be turned to you, the wealth of the Gentiles shall come to you. The multitude of camels shall cover your land, the dromedaries of Midian and Ephah, all those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and incense, and they shall proclaim the praises of the Lord. All the flocks of Kedar shall be gathered together to you. The rams of Nabaioth shall minister to you. They shall ascend with acceptance on my altar, and I will glorify the house of my glory. In the first 3 verses, we saw how the light of Messiah would shine among the people. Now we see something different. We see the people themselves shine with a kind of radiance, perhaps not unlike the radiance of Moses after he came down from the mountain. Now we can contrast this lifting up of their eyes with the instruction God gave to Abraham to lift his eyes and see. Go to Genesis 13, 14 and 15. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, Lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever. Now, instead of lifting their eyes to observe the land, Isaiah describes a time when they lift their eyes and see the great return of the exiles, presumably drawn by the light of Messiah. Isaiah observes a scene of tremendous joy. Not only the children of Israel return to the land, but the wealth of the Gentiles shall be carried with them. The word translated as swell in verse 5 is pakad, number 6342 in the Strong's Concordance, meaning to stand in awe. It will be a time when Jerusalem will stand in awestruck joy. Isaiah tells us that there will be a time of great restoration. Not only will the children of Israel be restored to the land, but the Gentile nations will also come to worship the God of Israel at Jerusalem. Isaiah mentions specific peoples and places where these Gentiles will come from. Verse 6 speaks of the dromedaries of Midian and Ephah. Ephah is a tribe of the Midianites. The people of Sheba are from what is today Yemen and southern Saudi Arabia. The people of Kedar are mentioned in Genesis 25:13 and are descendants of Ishmael. Now, isn't this interesting? Isaiah specifically mentions the Arab people who are in this day bitter enemies of the people and the nation of Israel. And yet at some point in the future, which Isaiah saw, they will be reconciled with the people of Israel and come together to worship one God at Jerusalem. Isaiah speaks of a tremendous wealth being brought into the land along with the returning exiles and the Gentiles. Isaiah 60, 9 through 11. Surely the coastlands shall wait for me, and the ships of Tarshish will come first, to bring your sons from afar, their silver and their gold with them, to the name of the Lord your God and to the Holy One of Israel, because he has glorified you. The sons of the foreigner shall build up your walls, and their kings shall minister to you. For In my wrath I struck you, but in my favor I have had mercy on you. Therefore your gates shall be open continually. They shall not be shut day or night, that men may bring to you the wealth of the Gentiles and their kings in procession. Then skipping down to verse 13, it says, The glory of Lebanon shall come to you, the cypress, the pine, and the box trees together, to beautify the place of my sanctuary, and I will make the place of my feet glorious. The nations and the people come, bringing gold and silver, bronze and iron. They bring their flocks and the majestic woods of Lebanon. It does appear that these are the materials to be used to rebuild the temple according to that described by the prophet Ezekiel. In this section of our Haftarah, we see a vivid description of the restoration of the wealth that will flood into Jerusalem at the beginning of a millennial kingdom. It will be a restoration of the kingdom like that of the time of David and Solomon, except this time it will be permanent with Messiah himself on the throne. There will be a redemption like no other described in verse 16. You shall drink the milk of the Gentiles, and milk the breast of kings. You shall know that I, the Lord, am your Savior and your Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. Now, evangelical Christianity and Judaism understand redemption in different ways. The Apostle Paul often spoke of redemption of our slavery to sin. Look at Romans 6:16 and 17. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves slaves to obey, you are that one slave whom you obey, whether of sin leading to death or of obedience leading to righteousness? But God be thanked that though you were slaves of sin, yet you obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine to which you were delivered. Now we were redeemed from that slavery by the ransom paid by the blood of Messiah Yeshua. In Judaism, however, redemption is seen as a deliverance from oppression and persecution, while Christianity views redemption as a private spiritual deliverance from sin. Judaism, on the other hand, sees redemption as taking place on the world stage for all to see, mankind being delivered from all oppressors. Now, biblically, both viewpoints are true, but there is only one Redeemer, Messiah Yeshua, who redeemed us from our slavery to sin, and he will return and deliver the remnant, both Jew and Gentile, from the bondage and oppression of our physical enemies. Verse 10 and 11 give us a clue to the kind of redemption that is to come. Kingdoms who at one time came against the walls and gates of Jerusalem to destroy them and enslave the people will instead come to rebuild the gates and walls. But the gates will remain open, and through these gates will flow the wealth of the nations. These Gentile nations will come to serve the people of Israel and to serve and worship the God of Israel. For many centuries, since the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 A.D. and the near total exile of the people in the early 2nd century, the land and the city of Jerusalem had remained desolate. Many pilgrims to the land wrote about their experiences and impressions. One such pilgrim recounts his experiences in the year 1267 A.D. How shall I describe our country? It is forsaken and desolate. The holier the place, the greater its state of neglect. Jerusalem is the most desolate locality. And 600 years later, in 1867, the famous American author Mark Twain visited the land and reported, Palestine sits in sackcloth and ashes, desolate and unlovely. It is a dreamland. Now there's a sharp contrast between these observations and the prophecy of the future Israel given by Isaiah in this Haftarah. Isaiah 60, verse 15. Whereas you have been forsaken and hated, so that no one went through you, I will make you an eternal excellence, a joy of many generations. Now we are seeing this future beginning to happen in our time. Since even before the rebirth of the nation of Israel as an independent country in 1948, the deserts have been cultivated and are blooming, and the population is returning and growing daily. But imagine what it will be like when everyone returns along with the Gentile believers. In this future redemption, there will be no more war or terror attacks. The violence will cease. Isaiah 60, verse 18. Violence shall no longer be heard in your land, neither wasting nor destruction within your borders. But you shall call your walls salvation and your gates praise. None of this kind of redemption and peace can happen without the presence of the Redeemer himself. Messiah's very presence in Jerusalem will be a great light to the world. Isaiah gives us a glimpse into what these times will look like. Look at Isaiah 60, 19 through 20. The sun shall no longer be your light by day, nor for brightness shall the moon give light to you. But the Lord will be to you an everlasting light, and your God your glory. Your sun shall no longer go down, nor shall your moon withdraw itself, for the Lord will be your everlasting light, and the days of your mourning shall be ended. In these two verses, we see that Messiah will be Israel's everlasting light and a beacon to the world. Because of his presence, there will be no mourning. There will be no wars where parents mourn the loss of their children. What we have looked at so far is that Israel, and in particular Jerusalem, will radiate the glory of God for the world to see. There will be a great restoration of all things that have been lost through the centuries of persecution and judgment. And we see in this Haftarah that redemption is assured for the people of Israel and the Gentile believers. But one other thing that Isaiah speaks of at the end of this chapter is righteousness. This millennial kingdom of Israel, with Messiah Yeshua present on the throne of David, will be characterized by righteousness. It is righteousness, or the lack of it, that is the major reason for the trouble God's people have faced over the centuries. It was certainly troubling for the faithful remnant of Isaiah's day and that of the entire history of the nation of Israel to see their glorious kingdom fall into desolation and exile because of this unrighteousness of much of their people and its rulers. The passage of Isaiah offers a striking contrast to the opening chapters of his book, where we find King Ahaz ignoring God's word and making unholy alliances with unholy nations in exchange for protection and a few moments of peace. The words of Isaiah in this Haftarah must have been a great comfort to the people of his day and beyond, to know that not all is lost, that there is a hope for a better future and a greater kingdom to come. Isaiah ends this chapter with an amazing prophecy concerning the kind and extent of the righteousness that will prevail during the millennial reign. Isaiah 60, 21 through 22. Also, your people shall all be righteous. They shall inherit the land forever, the branch of my planting, the work of my hand, that I may be glorified. A little one shall become 1,000, and a small one a strong nation. I, the Lord, will hasten it in its time. Now this speaks volumes as to the nature of daily life in Jerusalem during the millennial reign. Yeshua the Messiah will reign in perfect righteousness. It will be a kingdom where every person will be a righteous person, and the Lord will bless his people with prosperity and a large number of offspring. As we approach the end of this Torah cycle and the year-ending feast days, we need to come before the Lord with a repentant heart in order to be counted among the remnant and to be written in the Lamb's book of life. So let us comfort God's people as God commanded Isaiah. Let us reach out to each other and practice righteousness in our daily lives, preparing for the days when we too will return to the land. As Isaiah said, "Speak comfort to Jerusalem and cry out to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned." I'm Dan Cathcart from Moed Ministries International. Shalom and be blessed. Come and join us each Shabbat for the live discussion of our weekly teaching. Live streaming is available on the homepage of our website at moedministries.com and on our Facebook page. Blessings to you and your family.